So marketing has been a passion of mine. It's been my career for many years. So IMM is a perfect fit. I want to quickly, just before we go into the main presentation, I just want to quickly give you some insight into, and I think some of you might have heard, but I was watching Jeremy Maggs over the weekend, and he was talking to the head of South African Breweries marketing, and they were talking about how has lockdown and the coronavirus impacted what marketers need to take forward in their strategies in the future. So how is marketing changing into the future? And I think this is still something that's going to play out, and we should monitor that and be cognizant of some of the key things going down in this industry. But two key things he said was, one was customers want transparency. They want no frills marketing, no frills advertising. So it's about the core message and total transparency. And the second thing is all around distribution. Organizations need to reorganize themselves from a distribution perspective. And I think that has many facets. I know Marcia spoke about supply chain management and the impact of that on distribution a few weeks ago. But from a marketing perspective, I think distribution is not just advertising from our perspective on digital social media platforms. It's also about making sure your offering is presented obviously responsibly and in a strategic manner online as well. So it's both spaces that we're going to be playing in. But what I took out of that is to be a responsible marketer and truly engage with your customer in a responsible way. All right, so in terms of the presentation I'm going to go through with you today is just focusing more on Corona, the Mexican beer brand, and how they got themselves in the spotlight purely through brand name association. I'm going to switch off my video now because I want you to see the full screen, etc. And I'm going to start taking you through the presentation. So as we all know, the last 5 months, I mean, the word Corona, as I don't think anything has trended as much as the word Corona in the last 5 months. It's been a major health hazard worldwide, but not only that, it's impacted the way we do things from a business perspective. But at the same time, the Mexican beer brand has had some tough times in the media. I've done a lot of reading on Corona and the impact. And one of the key things that I discovered during this journey was there's very little commentary from the marketing team, the Corona beer marketing team. I think I found one article and maybe one comment where they've said that the impact has not been great. So, and we will talk about that a little later because that comes into how should we as marketers manage our brands in tough times such as this. So the Corona, I want to quickly go back to a little bit around the brand itself or the word Corona. The word Corona is basically a Latin word and it means, interestingly enough, crown or halo. Now, if you have a look at the Corona beer brand, the color of the beer represents that of the sun. And I read a bit about how the brand originated, and it was very much around the sentiment of the sun, the crown, the prince of beers, those kind of things. And a Corona means crown or halo. But if you look under a microscope at the virus, the image of the virus is very reminiscent of a solar corona. And I'll talk a little later in terms of where this word actually originated from in the 60s. All right, so I just need to make sure this presentation moves on. Great. So in a recent article, actually I read an article in the New York Times in early in 2020, where did all of this mistaken identity or mistaken association occur? People started Googling and doing searches around, and you wouldn't believe it. I mean, you would think this is not possible, but reports such as Corona beer virus and coronavirus beer, etc., all kinds of Google searches shot up in early in February, and this started piquing the interest obviously of the marketing team and the media out there. And one of the key things around publicity of this nature is, and I'm sure as the marketing team, if I was in the shoes of the Corona beer marketing team, I'd be asking myself the question, what impact does this have on the brand equity? Remember, millions of dollars have been spent in building this brand. And prior to this, they had a very positive brand equity. And brand equity is nothing other than, just to refresh your memory, it's about the value or the public's value or valuation of the brand. So it's way more than just a logo, a payoff line. In fact, it's more a concept, and it basically acts as a framework for understanding the power of a consumer's emotions in relation to the brand positioning. And obviously, brand equity does require that us as marketers need to shape the way the consumer thinks and feels about our brand. So I'm wondering to myself, what is the marketing team for Corona Beer doing? Are they sitting down and thinking, how do we change the sentiment towards our brand to be a lot more positive? Or do we wait this out and see how it plays? And interestingly enough, in the articles I've read, they've been kind of like quiet around this, and I'll talk about it a little later. They're actually launching a product as we speak in America at the moment, and the payoff line is rather dubious in relation to the current situation we find ourselves in terms of the coronavirus and lockdown. So if you look at what's been happening in the media, and I actually read an article by one of the marketing gurus or advertising gurus. His name is Glenn Pajarito, if I say that correctly. He's had many years in the advertising space. He's currently had 16 years at Saatchi & Saatchi as a creative director, and he specifically started tracking what's happening with the corona and the association with the virus. And he, in this article, said he's pretty surprised that in the modern day world, people are actually making this association. It doesn't really make sense in any way. But I just want to share some of the headlines that are out there. So when a brand like Corona makes headlines unintentionally because consumers react with a mix or a confusion and humor. And we might not always understand why this is happening. But the point here is, as the marketing team associated with this brand, it's extremely important that you are aware of the speak and the talk that is happening out in the media, online, digital, social, amongst communities, etc. So it's extremely important that you are vigilant in this time. He goes on further to say, and in fact, I've looked at this whole situation from a trademark perspective as well. And one of the trademark lawyers has said, even if the vast majority of people aren't making the association, there still could be damage to the brand's goodwill just because of the similarity in the names, purely because of the similarity in the names. And he goes on to say that the vast majority don't think that that the beer is tied to the virus. Obviously, I wasn't one of those, and I'm sure you neither. But one never actually knows what the subliminal message is that the consumer is getting out there. And there's a lot of communication around this, and I'll talk about it as we go along as well. You'll see now. So one of the questions one has to ask yourself, so who's actually to blame? Where did this all start? And I came across a very interesting, from a health and medical perspective, Corona, and it's strange, the word actually, as I mentioned to you, meaning crown and halo, one has to ask yourself the name, how did it get to being associated with a virus? In fact, scientists in the 1960s actually, once they looked at the virus under a microscope, saw these protrusions and thought it looked rather much like a gaseous ring that's visible around the sun during the eclipse, and hence them then coining the phrase corona to the virus, linking it to the virus. The one thing is for sure, I mean, I don't think that there is a more searched word than corona. So the word will definitely emerge from the current crisis battered and vilified beyond any recognition. And you have to ask yourself the question, so what do you do as a marketer? Do we then go and change the Corona beer name? Do we do that? I don't think. Personally, I think that's a little drastic. And what I want to do is share some examples. So what's happened with the Corona beer brand and the current situation we're finding ourselves in is not unique. In fact, there are a number of situations or marketing dilemmas of this nature that have happened in the past, and I'm going to share them with you. But one would think that this could actually be a PR nightmare, don't you? But in fact, having read the communication and looking at what some of these organizations have done, and I'm going to share that with you now, I don't think the current situation is a PR crisis at all for Corona. And I'll expand on that a little later. But other brands have felt the pain of homonymy. And homonymy is actually a Greek word, which means same name but different meaning, interestingly enough. So same name but different meaning. And there are 4 examples I want to share with you. Some of them rather tricky and I think quite funny, in fact. In Taiwan, for example, they launched a soda during the SARS epidemic, obviously not knowing, and they called the soda SARS. There were 3 products that I found some literature on called ISIS. One was for a chocolate bar, one was for a pharmaceutical company, and the one was for a software, an app, a wallet app, in fact. And I'll tell you a little later how the marketing teams treated the brand and what they did with the brand during this whole process. But another 2, one called Golden Gay Time in Australia. It's an ice cream bar. And the slogan was, it's hard to have a gay time on your own. And you can just imagine the backlash they got from that. But I think the most shocking, in the 1980s, there was a candy bar called AIDS, spelt, and you can see it on the screen, spelt AIDS. But worst of all, their payoff line was, AIDS helps you take off weight and helps you keep it off. Now, having said that, further reading with Corona, I mentioned to you that they launched hard seltzer during this whole lockdown period, and their payoff line is coming ashore soon. So I remember reading the journalist asking the head of marketing, so don't you think you should retract this launch, specifically given coming ashore soon? And my takeout from his response was, I thought they were a little blasé. I thought they were a little arrogant around it, and they said absolutely not. But again, you could also think maybe they're brave and they believe in their brand. So which way to go? That's the big question. So no doubt, the name Corona is definitely on everyone's lips. And in marketing terms, is that not an opportunity? I think it's a huge opportunity. It depends on how you spin the message. And I'll share some thoughts with you a little later as well. So I think Corona beer, the marketing team can leverage this opportunity, in my opinion. I think specifically, if you look at some organizations, Shell is getting involved in producing plastic masks, for example, because they were unable to produce their mainline product. Think about Corona. Can they not use some Corona beer? Can they not use some of their marketing spend and use it, for example, to support schools with providing them with sanitizing products and masks, etc. So how can you spin a situation like this into a positive sentiment towards the brand? And I think that's where us marketers should start focusing, is the opportunity out of a tough situation such as this. All right, let me move to the next slide. So times definitely are changing. I mean, we've had this has definitely tumbled us as marketers into a spin and making us all, from an operational business perspective, sit down and say, where to from here? And just in terms of those brands, I mentioned it a little earlier with those dubious names. I did say to you earlier, do you change your brand name? And indeed, all those brands did. So the Belgium ISIS chocolate brand changed its name to Liebert, and you'll notice it's a total shift from what it was. And the ISIS pharmaceutical company changed its name to Ionis, and the ISIS wallet app actually changed its name to Softcard. Unfortunately, though, for the AIDS candy bar, they only changed their name to Diet AIDS, which was not a significant enough change. And their product was removed off shelves very quickly after that and died a sudden death. Corona, it's a little different. This is a much bigger brand. Millions and millions of dollars have been spent, obviously, investing in building this brand. And they're still investing and building this brand. So what do you do? And I read another article from a guy by the name of Harvey Gabor. He's actually the art director. He's a copywriter. I mean, he's a real guru illustrator. He's been in the digital and above the line space. He's been across all key advertising agencies in America. And he says, you sit still and you wait for the storm to pass. So that's his sentiment when they asked him about what would you do if you were the brand manager for Corona. He said, just sit still and wait for the storm to pass. And I remember him quoting in this article the following phrase from Richard Nixon, and he said, the memory of the average American is 1 week, so just sit tight. So that was his view on this entire process. Also, one of the key things that came out of my reading around the trademarks, the trademark professionals also say the same thing. Sit tight and watch what happens, but one of the key things is they say, be very vigilant in watching the speak or the talk that is happening online and offline. It's extremely important that you do that. And this is where a PR company comes into play, where they can support the marketing team in being vigilant around the types of conversations that are taking place. And in essence, the takeout from that article is they say, keep your eye on the way the name Corona is being used. In other words, if you're using it and the suffix falls away, the virus falls away, that's when Coronavir needs to be stand up and show a bit of attention and say, how do we deal with this? Also obviously ensure against issues of dilution or disrepute towards the Corona beer brand in the marketplace. That's key. So you've got to watch that type of communication. And remember, I said to you, this is not a trademark issue. And it's also unlikely, I believe, that any other brand would take such a serious situation, such as the coronavirus, and try to implement a cheap shot or cheap advertising pot shot at this brand. I don't think anyone would be callous enough to do that. But it does mean that one needs to be vigilant around monitoring the conversations out there. One of the other key things that I picked up on in terms of the communication is the number of memes. In fact, there were far more jokes and memes around this whole topic than there were articles on the topic itself. And you can see on the screen one of the memes, you know what goes great with the coronavirus, Lyme disease. That's only one. There's another one where someone went, if you open a fridge door, there's a six-pack of Heineken sitting across from a Corona beer, and they've all got little masks on the bottle. So things like that. And we know, I mean, South Africans are amazing. In times of trouble, we make use of humor, jokes, etc., to minimize tension, etc. But it can also be dangerous for a brand. Memes and jokes can be seriously dangerous in the fact that it could spread misinformation and it could compound all the negative talk about the topic at hand. And interestingly enough, and this might be something we can explore at a later conversation, is the impact of memes and jokes on the brand. I came across quite a bit of reading around this and how marketers should look at it. So it's not merely as simple as saying, is it okay to make Corona minus memes and jokes? It's quite a complex topic, and something that does require conversation for a later date. So but I found them funny, I found them lighthearted, but I'm sure from a brand perspective, if I was the brand manager, I'd be seriously worried about what was going on and what was being said. Again, I have mentioned this to you. It's not exactly a PR crisis that I think the guys found themselves in. And I think herein lies a lesson. I think this is a very good case study in making the most of difficult situations. And I'd like to track this conversation that's happening in the media around this topic after post-Corona and see what the marketing team do and how they treat their marketing going forward. But one thing is clear, they've been quite silent around this. And I want to quickly remind you of, I don't know if you remember with listeriosis and the Enterprise Foods and how they were lambasted in the media when they went through a tough PR situation. Firstly, they didn't say a word in the media. And then when they did come to talk to the media and address the media, it was about denial. And then only once they were pressured and proof points were presented to the CEO of the organization, did he actually stand up and present any point of a half apology. So the way we manage situations of this nature are key. And I am going to share with you some strategies, best-in-class strategies that I've tracked through brands that have gone through tough times and how they've actually dealt with this situation in the market. But I thought, I went back. I'm almost there. I've got 2 more slides to go, but I went back in this whole conversation. I sat back and I thought to myself, is this not an unnecessary?
Yes, and I'm watching this thing of Anisa's.
Hey?
You know, that online thing. Well, not watching, I'm just listening to it.
So anyway, this quote is apt for me. And I thought this just sums up the situation clearly. The people who actually think you get coronavirus from drinking Corona beer are the same people who think that chocolate milk comes from brown cows. And we might laugh about that now, but it's a very real issue, this, in the minds of the stakeholders related to the Corona beer brand. I certainly think that the Corona beer brand must not, the marketing team, their CEO should keep engaging with stakeholders and the media, because if they don't, someone else is going to fill the vacuum, and it also leaves the door open for great speculation as well. So it's important to be vigilant and to participate in the conversation out there. So that leaves me with my second last point I'd like to make is, so what do you actually do when your brand is facing a crisis like this? And I'd like to talk you through a few pointers. Firstly, you need to be proactive. You need to be decisive but thoughtful in your response. A brand's reaction can mean the difference between absolutely a classy recovery and fanning any unwelcome flames out there. The second thing is you need to respond with speed. Don't wait. Give your view and continually give your view. An organization's survival in a crisis most certainly depends a lot on the speed of its response to any negative communication. You need to continue your strategic engagement. The lack of any engagement, and I'm talking about engagement with staff, briefing them what to say, engagement with your clients, engagement with suppliers, etc. It's extremely important. Plan and prepare. Scenario planning is an old term, but one thing someone should do, or the marketing team should do in a situation like this, is play out the various scenarios and then develop communication strategies that could address any of those potential scenarios that could play out in the marketplace. The other thing, and an important point, is to anticipate and adapt. The better you have anticipated the possibilities, what I've just spoken to you about in terms of the scenarios, the better you are able to react to the situation. One of the key strategies is apologize. However, in terms of the Corona beer, there's nothing they need to apologize for. It's nothing they've done to create this situation. This is merely because of a brand name, same name, different meaning. So it's nothing that they did. So in this instance, I would not, from a PR perspective, expect them to apologize, and they shouldn't. Take action and stay connected is key. But an important thing for marketers is adjust your marketing strategy. And that's why I started off with a point where Jeremy Mack said, what is the impact of lockdown going to be on how we adapt and change our marketing strategies going forward? So we need to consider these kind of things for the future. Great, then into my last slide. I think this quote is apt from David Ogilvy, but my passing thoughts on this are as follows. I don't think that this is necessarily a time for the Corona marketing team to panic at all. And for that matter, any other marketing team that or PR team that finds themselves faced with challenges of this type of nature today. So I think the other thing is, don't just throw your brand into a continuous stream of frantic tactics. Now's the time to actually build a powerful and resilient brand, obviously. And to do that, you should focus on the purpose of the brand. Businesses ultimately that are aligned behind a compelling purpose will ultimately inspire their employees, but more importantly, connect with their consumers and earn love and loyalty. that will persevere in times of change and times of hardship. Ultimately, obviously, then building a positive brand equity and absolutely ensuring the longevity of the brand. So for me, I don't think it's cause for too much worry. And as I've mentioned to you before, I've been tracking the communication. Not much else in a negative space has been said about the connection between the virus and the beer. And I'll be continuing the watch, and so should you. But more importantly, what do us as marketers take out of this learning, and how are we going to adapt our ways post the corona pandemic? So that's me, guys. I'd willingly take some questions from you. And if you have any just points to mention, please do mention those, and let's chat. Wow, there are many of you on online. Awesome.
Hi there, Anisa. My name is Melanie. I just have a
Melanie.
question for you. If you were the Corona marketing manager, what would kind of be your one biggest strategy now that you would execute coming into, you know, the levels are less restrictive now? What would be the one thing that you would do as a Corona marketing manager?
Well, in this crisis now, I would most certainly not have launched the new brand with the unfortunate payoff line. That's one thing I would have looked at. And in this time, I felt that they lacked proactive communication with the market because I couldn't find much around it. What I would do I would definitely play up the responsible marketing side in getting involved in opportunities to positively position the brand out there. Getting involved in green marketing, getting involved in marketing, working with communities to improve, for example, poverty and things like that. Responsible marketing is the coin that the guy from SA Brewery spoke about. And he said, we have to be responsible to our community. So as the brand manager, I'd look at what opportunities are in the marketplace to build positive sentiment. And one of the things I did pick up that they were considering, and they started building a factory in Mexico. And the objective there was, their strategic intent was job creation and using locals to build it, locals to work, etc. So they were going back to the site of origin of production was in Mexico. So those kind of things. But one other thing I would do is to build positive stories around the brand, stories related to the community. So that's what I would do. Anyone want to add to that and maybe have a different idea to what I have?
Sorry, Anisa, I have another question. Thanks very much for that.
No problem.
So you mentioned earlier that as a brand, Corona probably should not have stayed silent during the crisis. So obviously they weren't due to give an apology because they had nothing to apologize for. What would have been the narrative of that story? What would you have spoken about during the time of the crisis if it wasn't an apology?
One of the key things they did mention in an article was around the fact that the sale, now remember, lockdown in America is very different to lockdown here. We weren't allowed alcohol, but they were allowed in certain parts of the world. So one of the key things that they did say in an article is around the fact that the sales had not decreased significantly. And I think I would have just pushed the purpose of the brand. So that I would have used statistics. I would have been totally transparent, and I would have given stats to show, yes, we've declined maybe by 10%, whatever the case might be, but that's understood and it's because of this scenario, etc. But I would have then put a lot of information, educate around where the brand came from. Why the word Corona? What's the significance of the crown? Re-establish the purpose of the brand in the mind of the consumer. And that's the story I would have taken forward. I would have tried to focus far less on the virus. I wouldn't have amplified the connection between the virus and the brand name as much. I would have put the focus back on the beer, its purpose, what it stands for, and the good, because they do a huge amount of good worldwide as a brand, and tell those stories. They were very shy in telling the positive stories linked to the brand.
Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie.
Anisa, it's Angela.
Yes, and
I would have also used public relations a little more aggressively. And they might have done it, but I would have definitely worked with media houses and trying to get people to talk about COVID and COVID-19 versus coronavirus. And I think that's a sort of a behind the scenes strategy that I think would have worked really, really effectively. And then I also think from a global marketing point of view, what you'd probably find is that traditionally brands where their country of origin is, so for example, Corona in Mexico, the brand heritage is quite strong. But in places like UK, where they don't even know where it's from, they just know it's a beer, you would have to adopt a different strategy. So I think it would definitely be a PR in the background. But I agree with you in terms of just, the history of Corona and incentives for people to buy, doing kinds of promotions during this time, I think would have worked successfully. Maybe a holiday in Mexico. No, I'm joking.
Absolutely, Angela. In fact, most of these best in breed strategies I shared with you at the end come from quite a reputable brand company in America. And their article I read, they said, in times like this, we as brand managers get too emotionally involved and wrapped up in our brand. You need someone that can assist with developing the strategic communication and the message out there, and no better than a PR agency to do that. So I fully agree with you on that call. And strangely enough, that was not happening with the Corona team. Their CEO, from what I can gather in the communication I read, literally didn't actually put out a press release. Actually, it was a phrase or a comment he made that was included in an article. So I would most certainly have been a lot more proactive around PR. I agree.
Anisa, it's Maria Haman. I would like to ask you something and also just make a comment. Was it an option for Corona beer to potentially have gone co-branding just during this while and did maybe special branding where, I don't know, maybe like the World Health Organization, okay, maybe beer and World Health Organization, not the best idea, but if they did like special packaging where they talked about social distancing, maybe included like masks in like a 6-pack, etc., something around that. Could that have also worked?
See, I don't think co-branding is the right strategy. I would not have done that. I would have stuck to the purpose of our brand. But yes, most certainly, I would have gone and done a lot more proactive communication around and be associated with, like I said to you, for example, supplying masks or supplying food parcels, excluding the beer naturally, but supplying food parcels and things like that. Get involved maybe in schools, maybe getting involved in create small businesses out there, like the pubs. Maybe run an incentive for pubs that were closed and couldn't function during this time to collect money for them or support them because they are ultimately their distribution channel. So I would have looked for something in the value chain that the brand is involved in. That would include your distributors, the truck drivers, the pubs that distribute, the shopping, the stores such as Kmart and those guys that distribute the product. So I would have gone more an alignment strategy, not a co-branding strategy.
Yeah, I agree with you. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I definitely, as the head of branding for Corona, would not have opted to do anything that would associate me even more with the disease. So
Absolutely.
Things like masks and that, I would probably have been thought twice about, because what you're doing is reinforcing the association. And so I think my point of view is I would have tried to distance myself from anything that had to do with the virus per se, because that would just be reinforcing perceptions.
That's actually very true, Angela. I didn't think of that before. You're 100% right. Yeah. Anybody else for any comments or your opinion on something. I think important is I'd like to monitor this conversation, and I hope I've given you enough food for thought that you'll go out and monitor this conversation as well. And I'd like to see if the Corona team are going to change their tact on their marketing going forward, and what that means for us as marketers, what lessons we can take from that as well. So I think if there's no one else wanting to ask anything, we can close the session. Thanks guys for your time. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Anisa.
Pleasure, Michael.
Thanks, Anisa.
Ciao, guys.
Thank you, Anisa.
It's a pleasure. Have a wonderful weekend and stay warm. It's cold, freezing.
Thank you, Anisa.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. Hi, Robia.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Well done. Thank you.
Thanks, Ange, for the support. You're
No,
always
well
great
done.
that way. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Anise.
Yes. Hey, Krista, you good?
Good, good. Thank you.
Awesome.
Hey, Anisa, I got a different question.
Yeah, go for it.
It's not related. It's not related to
Clicking.
presentation. That's per se.
Okay.
Keep on clicking the unmute.
Michael, you've got your mic on. Sorry, Talent. How's it? Yeah, ask your question.
Okay, that's fine. I wanted to ask you. I recently moved to now based in United Arab Emirates.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask you, like, how do I get to continue with my studies, especially the exams? You know, it's hectic flying now that